I'm Cariad Astles. I'm a puppeteer, puppetry, performer, director, teacher and researcher. And I work in 2 universities in the UK, and I also do a lot of work with the International Puppetry Association, which is called UNIMA. It's different firstly because the puppet is, although a puppet can be a character or it can be an individual, it's also sort of representative of many people. So if you've got a puppet who's like, for example, a doctor, then it can be a particular character, but it can also be representative of many, many doctors. So it speaks beyond the individual. And the training is very different as well, because when you're training as an actor, for example, you are really focusing a lot of the attention on you and your emotional expression. But when you're working with puppets, you're trying not to be the centre of attention. So you're trying to sort of direct the attention onto something else, an object, which is part of you because you're holding it, but it's also somewhere else. I think it really does develop empathy. I think it really does encourage people, children, adults, to put themselves in someone else's shoes. People are often very, very, very protective of puppets. They see them as somehow vulnerable, which they are, but many people in life are also vulnerable. So I think the puppet evokes a certain kind of protective feeling, especially if the puppet is small or vulnerable themselves in some way. So I think it enables people to express themselves in a different way, to say things that otherwise they might feel embarrassed or worried to say. But I suppose the most important thing about puppetry is that it isn't you. It isn't a human being that's performing. You can go into different worlds. You can really explore imaginative environments. You know, puppets can fly, they can come apart. It stimulates the imagination in a very particular way. So I think imagination, empathy, and talking about sensitive and difficult topics, I think, are the perhaps most important things that puppetry gives us. There's a lot of interest in it. There's a lot of interest in it in education, a lot of teachers wishing to know how to use it. There's a new puppet festival in Beijing, the Beijing International Puppet Festival. There used to be only one university course in puppetry in China, which was at Shanghai Theatre Academy, which was very much about traditional Chinese forms. But there's now another degree in Central Academy of Drama in puppetry, which takes a more contemporary approach. So I think it's growing, yeah. Yeah, I think this has been a big question throughout Asia, because a lot of the traditional forms in Asia come from very, very ancient sort of traditions. Sometimes, not so much in China, but sometimes they come out of sacred or religious rituals, backgrounds and so on. I think it's important for them to meet. I think it's important for performers and creators of traditional forms to be open-minded, to possibly explore other ways of working with those puppets. But at the same time, I think it's incredibly useful for any puppeteer to be able to get to grips at least a little bit with techniques of traditional forms, because it gives you a really good grounding. In relation to content, I mean, traditional puppetry tends to repeat the same kind of content, tends not to be innovative in the sense of creating new content, but I think there's a lot of scope for using those forms in new ways. So I think if it's possible for those worlds to come together and to know each other's practices, I think that's the important thing, to find meeting points and to, you know, theatre has to be relevant in some way if it's to have an audience and if it's to be popular and so on. I mean, they certainly do, and they certainly will work together if we take the idea that a puppet is anything that you believe is alive. Some people say that a puppet is something that shows the it's alive through movement as well. Then of course AI could be a puppet. I mean, an AI is programmed. I had a PhD student who was doing a really interesting project about a digital puppet that was operated by the student live on a computer keyboard. But the digital puppet interacted live with people in real space. So I think that kind of interactions it's going to be much more. But then again, you could say, well, certain forms of transport mean that other forms of transport become obsolete, but people still ride bikes and walk and get trains and so on. Of course, other people ride on planes and some people in rockets and so on. So I think things change with technology. Things change enormously. And I think the definitions will change as well. But from my perspective, I think they are all kinds of animation. I think the whole question of reality is changing anyway. And AI also, the development of AI also changes what we perceive as real. I read a really interesting quote many years ago now. It said that we always assume that children are less sophisticated because they can believe in different worlds simultaneously, but surely that's a form of sophistication. So I think all the digital technologies, AI, live feed, etc., they're actually highlighting to us this capacity for different worlds existing simultaneously.